Hello, everyone. Welcome to a peek behind EU careers. We're sitting again in the studios of the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation in Brussels. And I have in front of me my colleague Jack Kelly, who works for the European Parliament. Before that, Jack, you worked for the European Commission, correct? And I would like to start by thanking you for being with us today and ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jack. I'm a British citizen, but I'm also a Luxembourgish citizen by birth. I'm actually half Turkish as well, something not many people know. As I said, I was born in Luxembourg. I'm 37, and I have a 2-year-old at home at the moment. And I work in the European Parliament now. I worked in the European Commission for 6 years, and it's been just over a year now that I've been working in the European Parliament.
Really interesting background. You told us that you're British, you are Luxembourgish by birth, but that you're also half Turkish. How come? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
My mother was a Eurocrat. She worked as an AST, so an assistant for the European Parliament. She joined back in the 70s, just after the UK joined the EU, and she got a job in Luxembourg. So she moved there. She worked for the Parliament for 40 years. So she was a Eurocrat, and in the jargon, that makes me a Eurobrat. So there you go. So she moved to Luxembourg. That's how she met my father, etc., and I was born there. So that's how that came about.
Right. You are now working for the European Parliament. What is it exactly that you do in the Parliament?
Well, I work in the Directorate General for Communication in the Youth Outreach Unit. I'm actually in charge of communication and events. And the big event that I work on is the European Youth Event, which happens every 2 years in Strasbourg. I'm in charge of the logistics of that event. So that's my big task. And we're already working on the next one, which will be taking place in 2025 in Strasbourg. So if there are any young people out there, put that date into your agenda. It's going to be probably in June 2025. And of course, you can come along if you're interested.
Well, I participated in the event in 2023, and I can attest to the excitement, the dynamics in Strasbourg around this day. So indeed, it is really something that is worth visiting, participating in the European Youth event. Was this something that you chose, working in communication, working with outreach to young people, or was it a coincidence that you happened to work in the European Parliament with these topics?
A bit of both. So I studied a number of things at university. I started off by doing drama and French at Bristol University in the UK. I did that for 3 years out of 4, and then kind of decided it wasn't for me quite late into my degree. And I was kind of casting around for what to do. And my ex at the time was living in Brussels, and one of the courses that interested me was psychology. And so she said, basically, if you want this relationship to continue and you want to study something, study psychology here in Belgium. Otherwise, it's over between us. So I started studying psychology here in Belgium, and 6 months later, it was over between us. So she brought me here. And I've been here ever since. So I studied psychology for 5 years, became a psychologist. I worked in psychiatry for 2 years in Belgium in a psychiatric hospital for children just outside Brussels. It was quite a hard job, which it often makes me smile when you look for jobs in the European institutions. They often ask, are you ready to take on difficult hours? You know, can you work long hours? And at the time, I had 11-hour shifts, night shifts too. And so whenever I see that, I kind of smile because it can happen that we do have to work quite long hours here in the institutions, but it's far rarer than in psychiatry. So that's something that doesn't scare me very much. In any case, I worked on this job for 2 years in a psychiatric hospital. And the job was really hard. There wasn't much possibility for career progression. And I also got the impression that I was helping a few people as much as I could, and I'd like to help more people, a larger amount of people, as much as I could too. And an opportunity to do a traineeship in the European Commission came up, a Blue Book traineeship. I applied for it, and I got in first time, and I was selected in DG AX, so the Directorate General for Education, Culture, Youth and Sport at the time.
Right.
And that's how my career in the institution started.
So would you say that the fact that your mother was working for the institutions, you called her Eurocrat, to use some of the jargon that people tend to use in relation to EU officials, had also some role to play? You were, I understand, raised in the context of the European school.
Yes.
Was that something that also played an important part of your decision to join the institutions?
Absolutely. The European School, I loved it. Some people don't like it, but I really loved it. It's a mix of cultures. You have different sections for the different language groups. And that's something, it's just where I feel at home, basically. So I've kind of always been an expat. Even when I was studying in the UK, I wasn't really from there, so I felt kind of outside. When I was working here in Belgium, I was working in Wallonia, so in a French-speaking environment. I studied in French as well here in Belgium, but I was just the foreign guy. Whereas in the Euro bubble, in the European school bubble, everyone's a foreigner. And so that's something you don't really find anywhere else. So that was something that was missing for me, and the opportunity to enter that bubble, to get back into a place where I'm working with people from different environments, different cultures. That's something where I feel really at ease. It's where I feel best, actually. So so I was happy when that opportunity for a traineeship came up to seize it with both hands and to get back into that environment where I feel at home.
I was also thinking, listening to you, that one of the things that I tend to tell people about my own career of 22 years in European institutions that has actually made me stay loyal to this EU public service are the many training, professional development opportunities that we get inside the system. Has that been your experience as well?
When I started working as a contract agent in the Commission, I was actually in charge of the learning and development of the Blue Book traineeship program. So I was in charge of the training that the trainees undertake. So I'm quite familiar with the different opportunities that are open for trainees and officials. It's something that is pretty strong here in the EU, in the institutions. Something that I've been able to take advantage of, since we're on the training side of what we can find here in the institutions, is that it's an extremely diverse workplace when it comes to tasks. Other things too, but specifically tasks. Sometimes we get the impression that all that people do here in the institutions is write legal texts and worry about paying organizations money and making sure that the finances work and everything. But actually, it's far more vast than that. EU law touches on everything, and so we need experts in every domain. So we hire experts. I have colleagues who are university professors, I have colleagues who are communication professionals, etc. But sometimes we don't have those people, so we have to train them. As I said, I studied drama and French and then psychology. That doesn't really set me out on a communication path, at least not academically. But I must say that I'm a communication professional now. I'm also an expert in youth policy, and I wasn't any of these things before starting here.
Right.
So I had the opportunity to take trainings in those directions that furnished me with the tools and the knowledge necessary to be able to be an expert in those fields.
I have to ask you about Luxembourg, right? The idea is that it is a boring, small, provincial sort of place, and I know that you have a different idea about that.
Yeah, well, as you said, I was born there. I lived there for 18 years. I became a Luxembourgish citizen officially in 2017 after a specific event in British politics. I hadn't needed to ask for citizenship before that, but I was very happy to ask for it then. And it's just increased my appreciation of the country. I found growing up there that it was basically a small paradise. It's an extremely safe country. I had a carefree existence in Luxembourg. It's a country, or it's actually the richest country in the EU and maybe even the world in terms of GDP per capita, which means that the country lacks for nothing. Every small village in Luxembourg has an amazing children's playground. I look for these things now that I have a young son, obviously. This means that you may have 6,000 inhabitants in a village, but there is obviously going to be a massive pirate ship or a free water park for the kids to play in. There's also always a football pitch. There's always a swimming pool. You have these things everywhere. So I don't really understand what people mean when they go, it's boring, because when I was living there until the age of 18, it wasn't boring, and it's only got better since. I think people may be comparing it to Brussels. Brussels, I think, now has a population of 1.3 million. That's twice the population of the whole country of Luxembourg. So it's not really a fair comparison. And actually, people also seem to be comparing it with London and Paris, which is not really a fair comparison either. But Luxembourg still manages to punch far above its weight. When I was there, Britney Spears came to Luxembourg, the Backstreet Boys came to Luxembourg. So these were extremely big stars back in the 2000s. And the same thing still happens now. It's one of the greenest countries in Western Europe. It's got lots of different regions. So it's got a kind of a hilly region called La Petite Suisse, and it does kind of look a bit like Switzerland. You've got waterfalls, you've got cliffs and things like this. It's a great place to go running, biking, mountain biking, this kind of stuff. If you're more into your wine, well, there's a small wine region along the Moselle, which is really, really nice. Some excellent white and sparkling wines there. And once a year, the biggest event in Luxembourg City is National Day. It's on the 23rd of June every day. And the night before that is a massive party in Luxembourg City. And about 1 million people from the region around Luxembourg come to that city. So they swell the population of Luxembourg City by 10 times. And there are free concerts in the streets. All the bars have stands outside selling. They're selling drinks. They're selling the local sausage, the Letzerbeer Grillwurst, which is really good, by the way. And the party goes on until the sun comes up. So it's really, really worth going to. If you don't do anything else, go there for that.
Well, Jack, I'm totally convinced. I may myself, after this interview, apply to a job in Luxembourg, listening to your description. And if anyone working for the Tourism Board of Luxembourg is listening to us, to this podcast, I think that you would be a great ambassador for Luxembourg. We're coming to the end of our interview. I mean, we've covered quite a lot of different topics, and I just wanted to know if there is something that I didn't ask you that you would like to bring into this conversation.
Sure. We haven't mentioned Brussels. So we mentioned Luxembourg. Big up to Luxembourg. I love it. No issues with that. But Brussels is a great place too. I haven't worked anywhere else for the institution, so I can't really talk about that. But Brussels,
Tell us about Brussels.
Yeah, I've been here for over a decade now. I love Brussels. It's another city that sometimes gets a bad reputation. I'm not too sure why. For me, Brussels is a bit like London on a much smaller scale, in the sense that its transport isn't amazing. You've got to plan your trip if you're going to take public transport somewhere, and it takes a while to get from one side to the other. But when you know where you're going, like London, you've got these kind of small islands in the midst of the greyness, in the midst of you've got a tourist centre in the middle that everyone knows. But outside of those spaces, you have some of the most wonderful squares and areas, beautiful architecture, amazing bars, amazing restaurants, beautiful parks. And if you know where you're going, if you know why or who you're meeting and where to go, then actually Brussels has so much to offer. It's a really wonderful place, I find. So be curious, get out on a bike, visit Brussels. Another point on that, there's a trip around that you can take on a bike around Brussels. It's called La Promenade Verte. Part of it used to be a railway that used to go around Brussels, and it kind of links all the parks and the Sonian forest around Brussels. So most of the time you're in greenery, and that takes you through, I think it's 17 of the 19 communes of Brussels, something like that. So you get to see places sometimes that have not such a good reputation, communes that aren't very, attractive for people working in the EU bubble. Well, you get to see them in an amazing light. There are places at the around the north of Brussels that usually people don't go to, that you wouldn't imagine had fields and cows in them. And this is in Brussels. So it's really worth doing that. La Promenade Verte, it's 65 kilometers. You can do it in about half a day, going at a leisurely pace around Brussels. It's pretty flat most of the time. And you can stop off in some of the parks, have an ice cream, have a beer.
Well, Jack, listening to you talking about Brussels makes me say again what I said about Luxembourg. We have a natural-born ambassador for these two capital cities, Luxembourg City and Brussels, just in front of us. Thank you so much. I have learned something new. I didn't know about the Promenade Verte.
There you go.
This green promenade by bike. And I may try it soon because it does sound very interesting. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure that many of us living in Brussels, like me, for 28 years, have still a lot to discover. And listening to you has certainly confirmed that. Jack, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
A peek behind EU Careers by the European Personnel Selection Office is an opportunity for people to learn about the life, work of EU staff in the so-called Eurobubble in Luxembourg, in Brussels, and beyond. It is supported by the Director General for Research and Innovation, in whose studios we record the podcast.